Good evening and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Council's Corporate Overview Scrutiny Group meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the local authorities' executive arrangements, meetings and access to information, England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to switch your microphones off when you're not speaking. And I also make sure that everybody's switched their phones to silent. Thank you. I would like to move to the first item on the agenda, which is the apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we have apologies from Councillor Matthews this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? No? In that event, we move to the White Ribbon Action Plan, and I think Mr. Banks is going to give us a report. Oh, sorry. I'm jumping the gun. I've forgotten the minutes. Sorry, let's go back one. We want the minutes of the last meeting. Has anybody anything to comment on pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we can agree the minutes and note the actions that were raised at the previous meeting. All right, thank you. Right, I'm too excited. I've got my white ribbon on. We'll now move to the White Ribbon Action Plan.
Thank you, Chair, and very pleased to be able to present this report this evening. So the report stems from the motion that was passed at full council nearly last year, so 7th of March 2024. There were two elements to that motion. The first one was to provide some feedback on the council's work to support the county-wide violence against women and girls strategy. And that's sort of covered in 4.7 of the report. And secondly, and importantly, to seek reaccreditation as an employer as a white ribbon UK organisation within the same time frame. So in terms of the progress that we've made since that motion, it has been considerable. So we formed a new white ribbon steering group, and I chair that group. That's an internal working group that covers all services in the council. There's about 10 colleagues on that group. And basically their role is to drive actions across the whole organisation which support our white ribbon plan. So another action that we did was to actually apply to the white ribbon themselves to seek reaccreditation, which we did, and we had confirmation on the 13th of July 2024 that our accreditation had been approved. Following that approval, we then had to produce a comprehensive 3-year white ribbon action plan. And I've actually got it here this evening. I've not appended it to the report because it is an operational plan of the council and it's changing all the time. But it consists of 35 pages of action. So it's a considerable weighty document that we've prepared covering the next 3 years, covering a range of different actions, which, as I say, the first year actions are covered in 4.6 of the report. I was delighted to say as well that following that submission on the 4th of November, we then received confirmation on the 3rd of February 2025 this year that actually our action plan had been approved by the panel. There were a few comments and observations, as you'd expect with a 35-page document, but it was certainly very well received by the accreditation panel at the White Ribbon organisation. So in terms of our next steps then, for the first sort of year, we're going to be focusing, as it details in 4.6, really around the specific training for staff on violence against women and girls. We're also looking to work with ensuring that our contractors that are used by the council are aware of our commitment and expectations around violence against women and girls. We're also going to be looking to undertake some work as well, and we'll do that through our sort of procurement arrangements as well. We have developed a pretty comprehensive communication plan for both internally at the council, but also external communication. Hopefully councillors tonight have seen some of that communication. Ed, who's here this evening, has really driven that plan. And also as well, any new starters as well, we have an induction process at the council. They're also made aware of the council's commitment to White Ribbon as well. We've also been heavily promoting as well. So everybody on the action plan group has either become an ambassador or a champion. Again, that's a really positive point. And also we've been, I think hopefully some councillors tonight as well have been on the training that we delivered last year through Broxton Women's Group. Again, that was really well received, I think. And everyone found it, the feedback from that was actually really positive. So that was good to see. And also in November as well, we heavily promoted It Starts With Men campaign, which was the theme of the White Ribbon campaign for last year. And obviously we'll be looking to support it again this year in November. So there's plenty of work that we're doing. Other work as well that we're looking to try and develop is our links with the sporting clubs. If you remember many years ago when we were a White Ribbon holder previously, we worked closely with Nottingham Rugby Club, and they actually had the White Ribbon on their jerseys, which was great. So we're starting some work at the moment with some of the sporting clubs, and actually there might be some news in a month or two's time about some further work that's going to be happening, not just in Rushcliffe, but actually across involving some of the sporting clubs. So we're hopefully confident of some positive news on that, as I say, in a few months' time. So a lot of activity in summary. As I say, it does run across the whole organisation, both staff and indeed councils as well. But obviously, we've only got a finite amount of resource that we can put towards this. That's why it's over a three-year programme. In terms of the support for the Nottinghamshire Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, 4.7 sort of covers some of the key aspects of how we've endeavoured to support that strategy. First one being really the delivery of the Safer Streets CCTV camera systems in both West Bridgman and Bingham Town Centre. Certainly, Councillor Williams will be well aware that really good feedback recently about the Bingham camera system and how it's reduced ASB and hopefully promoted that feeling of safety amongst women and young girls or younger girls when they're out enjoying the nighttime economy in both West Bridgman and Bingham. We've also attended a relaunch event hosted by the Police and Crime Commissioner, who's obviously very much committed to the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. In fact, that's actually how we met up with the Broxton Women's Aid women's group, who actually delivered the training. So that was a really positive event in lots of different ways. I've mentioned already about the training on domestic abuse for counsellors. Obviously, in your role as community leaders, it's really important that we have counsellors that are up to speed with the signs and how best to support people who might be needing help with domestic violence. We've also got officers who attend the Nottinghamshire Domestic Abuse Local Partnership Board as well, which coordinates activity across Nottinghamshire. We also attend multi-agency risk assessment conferences when they're required, again to support that. Often we're looking at that through a housing lens. And also as well, if we have need to as well, we'll support any domestic homicide reviews when they're called. These are initiated by the police and subject to agreement from the South Notts Community Safety Partnership. Then we'll look to support those and make sure any learning is well embedded within the local authority. So I think just to sort of sum up, Chair, I think, you know, in a relatively short space of time within the last 12 months, hopefully this report demonstrates how we've looked to try and commit and fulfil the requirements of the motion, the progress that we've made with the White Ribbon Action Plan, but also as well how we still continue to commit to supporting the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. Happy to take any questions before we move to the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. That's all very positive. I was just wondering, is there any way we could promote the White Ribbon? I'm aware that Nottingham Rugby took it on board because that's where I first became aware of it. But is there any way we could promote it at the sports areas, arenas and sports grounds that we've got throughout the borough, like Gresham and Alford Road, etc.? And obviously I'm assuming Ed and the media team will be putting it out on their reports.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got Amy Carter, who does an awful lot of work with the sports clubs, and certainly we'll be looking to encourage the sports clubs that we're working with, and indeed the facilities that we own and operate, to bring it to everyone's attention. Actually, there are some posters up there already, I've seen them. But it's important that we keep at that, and also as well making sure Ed's got a 12-month communications planner, and the White Ribbon heavily features on that throughout the year, but also obviously importantly in November as well. So
great. Well, I have to say, and I'm sure Gareth will back me up on this, it certainly gets, the message is getting out there, and I've been in Bingham and heard people talking about it and saying, and talking about safer spaces as well.
okay, great.
Yeah. So the message seems to be getting out there. Has anybody got anything they want to add? Councillor Way.
Thank you, Chair. The training, as you say, was very, very good. But one of the things that came out there was that, and maybe it's just me, but the terminology violence against women tends to conjure up the idea of physical violence. And what was paramount in that training was that the abuse against women or men is encompasses a lot of other things, like coercion, control, financial control and things like that. So in the training that you're doing around this for staff and others, is that being reinforced in there as well?
Absolutely, Councillor Way. So, I mean, the language, if you like, of ending men's violence against women is very much linked to the White Ribbon campaign. The kind of training that we deliver is much broader than that. It covers all the different sort of facets and aspects that you've just described.
One more thing. And I can appreciate as well the it starts with men, but I think probably most of us come across situations where it isn't men to women, and it can often be women on women in different generations within the same family and other relationships. And my concern is that if somebody comes forward with a problem like that, it's taken just as seriously as if it was a man that was perpetrating this.
Absolutely, and the County Council have commissioned, I think it's Equation, who offer support for male domestic abuse victims as well. So there is a consistent service, if you like, within the whole of the county to support both men and women who might be victims of domestic abuse.
But yes, I took Councillor Way's point that it's not necessarily women and men. It can be women and women, as she said, within families.
I think one thing that shocked me in that training session was the proportions of abuse against women and abuse against men. That it was, I think it was 2 to 1, if I remember rightly the figures. So the problem there is huge. It's not just a small proportion.
Just a couple of clarification. I presume violence against women and girls, we include as well other femininities, non-binary, and as well people who self-identify as women. In terms of the paragraph 4.6, ensuring contractors used by the council aware of our commitment and expectation of violence against women and girls, when we choose our subcontractors or partners, is it a requirement for them to be white ribbon accredited or to have a policy of antiviral support to their employees?
It's not a condition for them to be a white ribbon holder, but we are exploring how we can include businesses' commitment, if you like, to the VORG agenda and indeed to domestic abuse awareness training as well. So clearly we deal with a whole range of different companies, and some of them are very small, so it'd be very difficult, or medium sized enterprises, it'd be quite challenging, I think, for them to perhaps commit to something like this 35-page action plan. But obviously larger businesses and indeed, we're working closely with Parkwood, for example. They're doing an awful lot of work on this agenda as well. So I think it's about trying to make sure we, bring it in a proportionate way in terms of those agencies that we work with.
Does it extend as well to support to employees in the council that are victims of domestic violence and abuse?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we've got a very strong sort of health and well-being group, if you like, within the council. In terms of, we've got wellbeing champions, we've got a lot of support through our human resources team as well. So yes, absolutely. Anybody who is feeling they need some support can actually reach out through a number of routes, whether that's peer-to-peer or whether that's through management or indeed through human resources as well.
And the final question is, I know white ribbon is more of re-educating people, is on the idea level about healthy masculinity, healthy relationships and gender. But I would like to ask in terms of concretizing how that is going to translate in terms of more funding, more support, like for a few centers for children that are facing the consequences of domestic violence in terms of partnership with NCC or.
Difficult for me to answer on behalf of the county council, but obviously we do strongly support through our strategic housing service. We've got places like the Lodge on Hound Road, where actually we're able to support people who might be suffering domestic abuse, women who might be fleeing, a situation at home with children, and we've got accommodation, safe places and refuges where people can be supported with their housing needs. So that's clearly a role for the council. But then obviously we'll be reaching in as well with the county council as well to see about any support that can be given to children in those circumstances, or working closely with social services as necessary.
Okay, thanks.
I think it's probably a question of our raising awareness as much as we possibly can within the borough. We can't impose it on businesses. They have to sign up voluntarily. So the more we can raise the awareness, the better for the situation. I think you wanted to speak, didn't you, Councillor Williams?
Just one of my questions is around that, as you say, about awareness. In Bink, we kind of had a big push to try and get businesses J9 trained and have the logos and displayed in there. So there was a few bit that signed up for it, with the nature of their business of naturally having a safe space that people could come into, rather than just being a shop or something like that. And the town council is staff trained and got a safe space there as well. But with the J9, we kind of had tried to go with some of the sports clubs, and some of them found it difficult because of having so many volunteers and the place being open. If you're displaying like a J9 kind of stick in the windows, and somebody wants to go and get help, is having people that are then trained and making sure that they're there and on hand, and actually know how to help somebody in the best way. What is kind of where encouraging local sports, you mentioned Nottingham Rugby and that, which of course are quite a big organisation as a sports club. What is there being done kind of with grassroots to support them, and what is it that they need to do for a white ribbon accreditation? Is it similar to J9, or is it slightly different to J9? Because there's different accreditations. but also how's also there's been Equation, I think it is, in the round South Notts, and they've been doing a lot right around rural domestic abuse. Is there anything in the strategy about kind of that rural domestic abuse because of and the nature of that? Because I went to a training, well, not training, but a session about the rural domestic abuse and how that can be different to how people's experiences in a more urban area like West Bridgford, where there's the help that is potentially more accessible on their doorstep because of being in an urban environment, whereas somebody on a rural area can be very much isolated within a community that knows what goes on and that. And some people in a rural setting find it difficult to get the help because sometimes if they go and ask for help, it can get back to the abuser, and then it makes the situation worse. So they feel very much isolated. So I was just wondering if there's anything around in the strategy for that type of thing. Thank you.
I agree with, obviously my ward is a rural one, so I absolutely identify with that. And getting an understanding of a campaign like the White Ribbon out in the rural communities is quite difficult. And I wondered where the tie-up was, or if there was a tie-up with J9 and Ask Angela and all these other organisations, because if we're not careful, we have little pockets of people who, we're tied, we've done it, we're with J9, or we've done it, we've got a safe space. But they all address something different. And I think it's like everything in this world. We seem to have agencies that do all sorts of things, but they all work in silos. So we need to pull the strings together. And I don't know whether you liaise with the others or not.
Well, it's quite difficult to control the voluntary sector in this space, to be honest. And I think it's important, we obviously work closely with the county council, who commission, if you like, the county-wide services around, Juno, Women's Aid and Equation, as I say. And so those services that provide that consistent support network, if you like, irrespective of whether or not you're in a town or indeed in a rural area. And it's great to see, the county working with Equation to deliver these sort of rural sessions and that to promote wider understanding. And obviously we'll support that. And I think it's important as well that we recognise, if you like, that there will be a number of different charities, campaigns, voluntary groups that have, very well-intentioned agendas, if you like, and campaigns, if you like, around this topic. And I think, it's would be difficult for us to intervene and try and shape those, because actually, there's space for them all, I guess, in terms of that, of trying to support and promote the wider objectives of raising awareness of domestic violence and domestic abuse. So I think, we're certainly trying to map and understand who's out there and how do we work with them, but we're certainly not trying to replace them. We're simply just trying to make sure that Rushcliffe Borough Council is doing all that it can as an organisation to influence and provide leadership on this topic.
I just worry when there are so many that somebody slips through the net, so to speak, because they think they've reported to some organisation, but it wasn't quite their remit.
So the net, if you like, is the county council commission services that provide that consistent service, if you like, across the whole of the county. And they're not commissioned by Rushcliffe Borough Council. That's something that's the county council lead on to create that, hopefully, that safety net across the whole of Nottinghamshire.
Thank you, Mr. Hanks. Oh, Councillor Plant.
Thanks. Just a few comments. It is pleasing to see how much has been done in the first year, and obviously there are 2 more years to go, so that can only be built upon. Just a few comments. Do we have sort of any actual data on sort of violence against women incidents in Rushcliffe that we could, could have see, not now, obviously, but could perhaps be sent?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we actually shared some, didn't we, at the training? If you remember, I imparted some data there
I've forgotten that day.
at the,
Come
at the,
on.
at the
Come on.
training. So yeah, we do have some data around that.
Be interesting to see.
Yeah, we'll share that afterwards.
And then what was I going? Yeah. So in terms of paragraph 4.2, I think that obviously the point that Councillor Way made, that in terms of the violence, very much is obviously not just physical, and the coercive control is a really strong element that often you can't see the bruises for. It was an important point to make. And I think at the end of the day, with the whole issue, communication and keeping it sort of upfront, and it's never done, is it? Because it's there's never be, oh yes, tick that box, we've actually achieved it, and there isn't any more violence against women or men for that matter as well. So I think Ed's role in terms of getting the message out ongoing is really crucial. So my question also on these was it says raised awareness and sign up for ambassadors and champions. I'm not sure who they actually are. And I would be interested to know about the promotion. It said it starts with men. Really, I mean, I think that should be, it starts with boys, because it's the education of boys to actually prevent them becoming men who actually obviously perpetrate violence. So, but I would be interested to see how both of those issues are actually being communicated. And are very important in terms of all the work that's been done, getting that message. I mean, in terms of some of the councillors' reports that come out, obviously you can see it there, but it's where is it in the wider community that that we really need to know about. So it's residents are actually seeing this is what Rushcliffe stands for, and just a bit more about that, please.
One of the most sort of higher profile places was, for example, our customer service point in Westminster Library had a pull-up banner in place all over the festive period. One of the times of the year that sadly you get the peak in domestic violence in all its forms, and that has garnered an incredible amount of response from the hundreds of people who walk through the door every week. It's amazing how much the customer service advisors were chatting to, and we're going to replicate that again, roll them out at all the other contact points as well. So it's that physical. I think when Councillor Cumberlack talked about our sports venues, it's footfall. It's the amount of times you can get the campaign seen and people resonate it and ask about it. It's an incredible talking point. So yeah, we're really mindful to put that in the eye line of residents. So it isn't just about social media, which we'll continue to do, but also looking at other ways in which to actually promote it as a talking point in the community.
So back in November as well, we also did the campaign as well down at our Streetwise depot. I don't know if you saw, but you had a lot of the guys down at the depot sort of holding up, messages and so on. And again, that was fantastically promoted by Ed and the comms team. But also we had that sparked conversations amongst colleagues, and actually then colleagues then going home to have conversations. And we mustn't underestimate, if you like, that ripple effect of people actually taking conversations and the topic back home, perhaps going to the pub and having a conversation around it. It's that kind of, making it a topic that people do feel comfortable about sharing. And one of the things you were wondering about what the difference is between ambassadors and champions. So ambassadors are men that have undertaken the training, the white ribbon training, and champions are women that's undertaken the training. So if you go onto the white, pardon? Yes. So Rushcliffe, yes. So all the action plan group, the action working group, we've undertaken training. So the female colleagues have undertaken the champion training, and all the men, including myself, have done the ambassador training. And then we've also tried to promote that. If you remember, Councillor Inglis has been promoting that amongst all the elected members as well, to undertake the right type of training, whether that's the ambassador training or the champion training. So if people haven't done it, I would really encourage people to do it, and we need to keep on at encouraging that that take up, if you like.
If we could Are you able to give us a list of those ambassadors and champions so that we know that these people have done it and, as you say, promote it amongst the councillors?
Yes, can do that.
And something has just occurred to me. I don't know whether you said when you went to Streetwise they were holding up signs with the white ribbon on. Could we consider doing something similar at proms in the park? That would get it out to a much wider audience.
Yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Just on that kind of promotion of the campaign and like that, I think it was like a video of people holding it up, and I remember it wasn't necessarily last year. It might have been, I think it was last year. Myself and Councillor Regan did it in Bingham to promote it. But is there something like that that could be put on the screens here in the arena, and like a Bingham arena where people come in and access, like you had a great campaign in the contact point. Is it worth kind of speaking to Leisure around how they could utilise some of their like machines and screens and stuff like that, just to advertise it, even if the kind of the pull-up does a roadshow type of thing, goes around in reception areas, and that type of kind of thing. And I was just wondering, not sure I did about what the accreditation is for local sports clubs, and what they kind of need to do, if it was different to White Ruin or J9. What is it that they need to do? Is it that they have to provide a safe space or have people trained up, or just kind of like a safeguarding kind of officer that they have? Is it just that person can kind of get the accreditation?
I'm not an expert on J9, so I can't really comment on that. But in terms of White Ribbon, there's no barrier, if you like, for sporting clubs of a certain size to apply to become a White Ribbon organisation. I guess it's all down to their commitment. There's lots of information on the White Ribbon website. Certainly, I'd encourage, if you're in touch with sporting clubs in Bingham, then please feel free to pass on their details of the White Ribbon. Hopefully we can try and get more sporting clubs to sign up.
Good evening, everyone. We're at the Q3 position now, which takes us to the end of December 24. So in the previous 2 quarters, we've been reporting underspends for both revenue and for capital, and that continues into Q3. So we've got a net revenue efficiency of 2.164 million, and as usual, the main variances are in Table 1. Capital is underspent by 4.4 million, and we've got some recommendations for some rephasing. In terms of the revenue underspend, the main efficiency comes through financial services, with the interest income mainly, and also we've got additional grant income and business rates, improved position, including pool surplus. Table 2 is the use of the projected underspend. So in quarters 1 and 2, we've proposed certain uses of that underspend, and there's a couple more been added for Q3. So we've got the IT contracts. So that's an underspend that's arisen because some projects aren't being rolled out. So that will be requested to be carried forward into next year. the Treasury Capital Depreciation Reserve. So that's featured later in the report, which is our multi-asset investment, the pool funds, and the fact that we've got a loss against the original investment, and so it's to top up the provision towards that should we need to recognise it if the I forgot the word, if the statutory override is not renewed. And then the organisation stabilisation reserve, obviously because we've had the white paper on the devolution and the local government reorganisation, so just putting some money aside for any costs that may arise from that. Special expenses is showing an overspend position. So this is mainly because of shortfall in income on our room hire. So we were hoping that this would catch up, but it seems reasonable at this point in the year to reflect that that's looking more unlikely. And also there was some additional costs at Christmas due to the weather conditions and the need for some accessibility requirements. The underspends on the capital programme, so table 3 is some projects that need rephasing into next year, and the remaining areas are ones we've reported before. So the main one is the 1.5 million for land acquisition. We're not rephasing that at the minute because it's still possible that some land could become available that we might have to purchase, but it's more than likely going to be requested to be carried forward if we don't find anything. The Cotgrave and Keyworth Leisure Centre enhancements and the crematorium, they're allowances for any post-opening enhancements. So there will be some savings against that, but again, likely that we will carry that money forward in the event of any other works that need doing. So just in terms of the efficiency plan then, so at Q3, we've achieved 0.618 million of savings so far, and we would have expected to achieve 0.609. So we're actually slightly ahead of that, and we are expected to achieve all our targets. I've already mentioned the multi-asset investment funds. So in conclusion, we're still in a positive position. Obviously, there's lots of challenges coming up with simpler recycling and the local government reorganisation. Capital is currently positive. Obviously, we've got diminishing returns, but we still see no reason that we'll need to externally borrow this year. Any questions?
Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive run through. Councillor Edgar.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I'd picked up. You mentioned the pavilions, and then I think the report sort of points out that Julian Khan and Gamston bookings are below the thing. I think Gamston, it's almost like post-pandemic, although it's been refurbished, hasn't picked up from where it used to be. So is there anything we can do to promote it back to the people who used to use it, if you like? That, and obviously Julian Khan's always been a bit of a problem. It's always been difficult to get bookings there for whatever reason, and then again, you know, over the years we've spent quite a lot of money on it, and you know, again, funnily enough, actually, I do know one or two groups who use it regularly and really enjoy using it because actually it's quite a good facility, but it's not. It's always been underused. So that was one thing, and I think the other thing is on recycling. I don't think we should be over concerned about the sort of drop in performance because it's actually green bin tonnage that's down. I think everything else is being recycled at about the same level. You know, I think that's I was just making the point that I don't, you know, is that really something we should be worrying about? Because if green waste is down, doesn't mean to say that You're looking puzzled. It is in the report, I'm sure.
I was going to say,
Sorry, it's in the
I think
performance,
Ed
yeah.
will be dealing with the performance.
Okay, right.
So, right,
I was getting ahead of myself, was
you are. Same as me.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Just coming back on the other Gamston question, I think we've revisited this before. There's obviously been a change, as you might point out, post-pandemic. I think falls into the category of groups that were using the facility and now no longer do. There's been that shift and change in behaviour. We've reached out to all of the previous bookings, or say we, the facilities team who look after the sites, and it's a case of they contact them regularly again to check and double check that that nothing has changed. It's simply some groups have just don't exist anymore. There isn't as many community groups, sadly, using some of our facilities in some places. So yeah, it's our task now to try and reach out to new audiences, new groups who might be out there. But it's sadly probably one of those parts of the pandemic where there's slightly less social cohesion than there was. So
we are rather taking these a bit out of sync. But what I wanted to ask with regard to the performance in the community halls, etc., is this typical of the rest of the country? Is everywhere having similar problems?
Very much so in terms of a national change in habits. I would say that's a little bit of a sweeping generalisation, but certainly, yeah, the data would back up that. I know in terms of talking to other local authorities in Nottinghamshire, certainly they've seen the same. There has been that drop off, and it's a slightly, to some degree, a generational thing as well. That some groups that have historically used them for many years have then, the pandemic's been the reason they've stopped and they've not reformed because they've evolved into other groups or gone the way. So yeah, there's definitely a nationwide trend. I
think we're socialising in very different ways, aren't we? And the pandemic actually accelerated that. So maybe we're looking at something that we need to transition to something else. Are you, Councillor Plant, did you wish to say something with regard to Kate's report?
Yeah.
We seem to have got a bit out of sync.
Other ways we're socialising. Got distracted there. On the report, yes. Rushcliffe Oaks, obviously not still reaching the targets, presumably that we want to. I mean, it's a lovely setting, venue, whatever, and I have been a few times, and I have to say I much prefer it to Wilford Hill. I wonder, I don't know, can you even compare? In the fact that is Wilford Hill still seen as the most popular one? It's the language you're using when you're talking about obviously somebody dying, isn't it? It's quite difficult. Is it just that's just still the most well-known place still? Is it still trying to obviously get Rushcliffe Oaks better known as a place to be used and as a very well designed and very appropriate place for the crematorium? That's my one. There's more, but if you answer that one. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a case if you've got a facility that's been there that length of time, and with respect to its location, its profile, where it is, people relate to it a lot more, may go past it a lot more. It's on a major route out of the city, out of West Bridgford. So yeah, it's obviously had that affinity with it. It's a much larger site as well for lots of reasons. So yeah, it obviously got that public appeal already, and that's what Rushcliffe Oaks is building on it as we speak. I think as the report, sorry, we're going back to the performance side of things. What the team there are continuing to do is try and build those relationships with local undertakers. They're working with AW Lim and others more and more extensively, and it can only, it's the time it takes for any, if you use the word business, to get going and build that up. But they are reaching into new ways, another way, and it isn't just that, it's about raising the profile. You might have seen things like the Comfort Dog Maisie and others. There's ways in which that the team there and the council are looking at in a different way. I think later this year there's an opportunity they might even be having their own beekeeper on site. Ways in which I know that this sounds small things, but it's amazing how it resonates with people and raises the profile. So yeah, it's an ongoing project, as you might imagine, and the decades that Wilford Hill has got, you can imagine why it's a little bit more in the public eye.
I think we've really rather preempted your report. So I'm just wondering, are you able to sew it together?
Am I? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Are you still with performance, or are you?
No, where I am actually. If I'm honest, table 2 is one. Is that
Right,
you?
so that
have you
is
done
you,
it?
Kate.
Yeah. Right. Can I carry on that one? I was just interested on the tourism signs for the borough. Obviously, it's somewhere in there. And I just wonder what that signage would be, where it would be, because really, I just think that I think tourism's something that we could really build on in Rushcliffe. I mean, I've always felt this in terms of West Bridgford, that we've got top of my head, Luttrell Hall, St Giles, and I was really pleased to see that the I can never get this right, Anderson shelter on Abbey Road, or is it Anderton? Never know, have been opened up. You know, amazing and obviously really educational and a really good thing to do. But I just think there's loads of other elements within the borough that we could sell. So I was just wondering where these signs were and what they were about. Were they just the beginning and we would be building on that?
Yeah, there's no specific plans at the minute. That was just given as an example of the kinds of things that money will be spent on, but we can certainly take that suggestion away.
Yeah, we have been developing a tourism strategy, so all linked to what you've been saying. So we are on with that, and the signs are going to be the sort of major sort of arterial routes, is where the signs will be. You know, around Rushcliffe. I can't think where they exactly are, but like, you know, the 453 and the major routes that come in. So the plan is that there's been a bit of a debate. Do we still have the signs with LGR? But the feeling is we should still have them. Rushcliffe's still going to be a place. So that there's going to be progress on the signage.
Councillor Polenta.
Yeah, on table 2 as well. On the Homes for Ukraine Q1 report, is it the expectation that I think has been extended over 18 months now, the Ukraine Permission Extension Scheme, that this fund is going to be utilized because of this extension, the 18-month extension in that year?
Yeah, this money's there to be made available for people who were with hosted families sort of moving on. So the money's still there should we get any of those. I'm not aware of any time limit on this. I know we'd be looking to carry that money forward to use should we have any in the next financial year.
I thought it was extended the scheme for another 18 months in February.
I
so there'll be,
don't know. I'd have to have a look at that, but that money's there. Should it be needed anyway? So if it has been extended, then we'd be allowed to. We've not been. The money came originally from the county council, so we've not been asked to give it back.
Thank you. Anyone else have any further questions on the finance element for Kate? Right. Ed's managed to find his place, and we'll move on.
Okay, this is rather shorter than in. Yeah. Yeah, this is rather shorter than obviously we've answered quite a lot of the points already here. I know Councillor Dewing mentioned first of all of the in front of you the appendix F we're referring to here. There's 9 indicators this time around that haven't reached target. We've mentioned about percentage of household waste. Councillor Redeving's right in terms of this is just specifically an anomaly this occasion on the garden waste tonnage. The grey and bins are consistent, but we'll keep an eye on this in terms of if there is a continued significant drop in garden waste tonnage and why that is. Percentage recycling contamination rate, again, the rise is somewhat connected to changes that were made to how Veolia measure this. So it's maybe not as much of a concern, it's just understanding more the methodology, how samples are tested. So we'll look at that for future quarters. What we'll say on this is we're still looking at an action plan to reduce the number of wrong items that go in the blue bin. We did this towards the second half of last year, and we're going to reintroduce it again soon on our channels. So that's in line with simpler recycling rolling out later this year. Education campaigns to make sure residents are aware of what you shouldn't place in the blue bin. We've already talked about usage of community visitors as well this evening. It's been a positive that Gresham Sports Park has seen those increases on its targets, but overall, yeah, we have got still work to do. So we continue to promote the venues where we can, extensively on social media and elsewhere, and the facilities teams and community development teams actively contact new and existing customers for future bookings. It is a competitive market out there, and we've talked about the reasons, obviously, already as to why the nature of the competition has changed. The other thing that we're talking about as well, mentioned about Sir Julian Carn Pavilion, that will have a refurbishment soon. That's led to some lost bookings, just clashes in timings that we can't accommodate. In the room that we're sitting in, of course, as well, we're going to be having the AV equipment replaced as well. So that is one underway, again, with the intention of trying to drive more meetings, events of different types that can use those facilities. Reference to Rushcliffe Oaks, we've already talked about Councillor Plant's question around that. I can only reiterate again that the team were not anticipating that the target until December last year, that the numbers would be as low. That's a positive, of course. Hopefully people are living longer, but we'll work out the team as well as each Q3 like this goes past, if there is a dip in numbers, why that is, and learning well and trying to get more understanding from undertakers and others as to why numbers aren't in line with what we're expecting. Then also just a very, very slight dip has been on the average number of days to process a change in circumstances to a housing benefit claim. Again, this is only a small anomaly. I can't recall this coming up in recent years, and it will fall below in line with the target again after the annual billing process is completed this spring. One that's we've not touched on before is just the percentage of councillors completing e-learning. We're really aware on this one about the time it takes members to have to go through the process that is e-learning, and all the Democratic Services team I know do is to continue to encourage of its members to complete that learning, highlighting why it's important for the wider learning of understanding the public sector, understanding the council more, but equally understanding the time and restraints and resources that councillors have to complete it all. So that's obviously work to do there in that area. Finally, just on digital transactions, we've got some increases in terms of e-form completion. Payments on the website are good, but transactions decreased in other areas. We just get variations like this from month to month, and on this occasion in this quarter, it was slightly under the target. Is there any way you'd like to start more of the discussion?
Thank you. You managed to find your place. And I think we've had some comments on performance. Yes, you mentioned the e-learning. This has been a bit of a problem for some time because it came up at the member development group in March last year and was flagged up as a bit of an issue. And you did, in fact, alter some of the titles to say that some were mandatory. I have to say, I think there are several reasons why it isn't as successful as it probably ought to be. We've seen figures that show that the face-to-face seems to generate a better response than the e-learning. And I think there are two probably factors. One is that not everybody responds to e-learning. We all learn in different ways. But the other is, of course, providing a facility for people who are working or have children and can't actually manage to attend all the training sessions in person. So hybrid of some description is what I think we should be looking at and going forward. I think we need to scrutinise the learning process. And I think, would it be appropriate for that to be done by this group, or would it be better to go to governance?
Well, I think in the first instance, a couple of things. There is the training programme was set at full council, so it was in 2021. So it's a learning and development programme for full councillors, and that really was and that was 2021 to 2025. So actually, this is the last year of that particular programme. So it is appropriate to revisit it because we've got to do another report to full council on it. The question then is, where should it go? So member development group is really there. That's where the training is generally discussed. So my suggestion is we'll look at drafting it drafting a new programme as a discussion document for member development group. And then depending on what member development group also say, that'll input into the report that would then go to full council. That would be my suggestion. It is difficult. It's a real balancing act. Some people actually prefer, believe it or not, they do. Some people actually prefer the e-learning. It might be hard to believe, but they do. But it does have its advantages. It's you can do it obviously in your own home, your own time. You can manage it better rather than us having set times when people come to the training. And sometimes, particularly when we get, I can remember when I discussed this when we set up the report in 2021, and I can remember some of the discussions with the cabinet then when we were talking through the programme, and the challenge we used to have is we'd start running courses, and not many councillors would attend. We'd often get third-party providers in, and to be honest, it wasn't very good value for money for the council because we were paying for trainers to come in who weren't particularly cheap. And not many councils would attend. And obviously we've also developed the e-learning packages specifically for people to use. There's already been an investment in time, and obviously with my budget hat on, there was only a finite level of resource as well. So we have to balance all of that. But at the same time, we want the courses to be as stimulating as possible. And I was talking to Councillor Cumberland just beforehand, before the meeting, us as officers, we have to go through the pain of e-learning as well. So it's not just councillors, but unfortunately, it can be a necessary evil. And certainly the more mandatory type, as we call it, the mandatory training, the more important training for councillors, is all we do. Probably try and do that in person. So things like budget training, that type of thing, and then there'll be other things like planning. I think that you'll probably get more of that in person. So we do try and do some of that. So it is going to be, I don't think we'll ever get away. It's going to be a sort of mixed economy of e-learning and in person. And it's my view, because as much as anything, it's partly down to resources. It's trying to please different people where some people can't get to the training and those sorts of things as well. So it is a bit of a balancing act.
Yes, I think we understand the financial constraints, but I think in training counsellors, I think you have to remember that counsellors are counsellors because they communicate face to face with their electorate, and that's the nature of the beast. So they like that interaction, and the E element is not there. But like I say, there are councillors who can't do the face to face, and we need to cater for them as well.
Yeah, well, just I suppose to come back on that also councillors embrace modern technology and modern ways of working. So there's different ways of looking at it.
Oh yes, indeed, yes. I mean, we've gone through that painful transition, but I think there is still room for face to face if we can do it and if it can be delivered in a financially viable way. Councillor Williams.
As we're on the subject of e-learning and learning, I think kind of right is where we did have a members development around mandatory kind of topics, where in order to be on a committee, you have to have the training license in planning, finance, as you say, and for everybody, GDPR, which was the big topic, remember, of discussion, and how we kept people to meet that kind of indicator for the council of it. And that's where e-learning was difficult to get people to do GDPR. And people found that if you were coming in, had a trainer doing it and discuss, then maybe it might encourage people more to sign up for like GDPR training, or if people have done it in their own day-to-day jobs, was to demonstrate that they've had it there. I think with e-learning, it was then seen to be more kind of to run alongside a program of face-to-face and complement kind of face-to-face learning on some of the subjects, not to replace the mandatory kind of training and that. So that's where I think it's where it's got that, although in the report it says like councillors are required to complete, it's like not all the kind of elements in there. And I think as well we had it is where councillors from previous term had done e-learning on that kind of subject, it might not then necessarily show this year. So there was those kind of things that we discussed. So I think the whole thing just needs to be kind of looked at. And if there is e-learning, that if somebody's done it the once, is there a time frame like GDPR, like planning, like licensing, those kind of things that you've got to be constantly with your knowledge of updating it. So yeah, I think being worth of having a whole scrutinise of the whole process is going to be beneficial, because like I said, people do learn differently and lives and all that can get in the way of being able to attend here, because often it's as better in the world of having an afternoon and an evening training, but then only on the 2 days, and not everybody can for some different reasons. So I think yeah, it would be beneficial to scrutinise it and what goes on, and to make sure that it's best value for the council in order to meet the obligations that we have to, like as I say, around like licensing, planning, training, meet those indicators for auditing and that.
I concur with what you're saying. When is it scheduled, or do we know when it's scheduled to review member development?
I mean, we are slightly behind partly because we've had a resource issue with Charlotte being off, so there's a reason for that. So the plan would be, obviously we've got May Council when everyone will know what groups are in, so hopefully we'll know who the people are in the member development group, and then I'd expect it to be early in the summer, not long after then. So it'd be sort of obviously try and get it in before the holidays if we can. Okay. That will be the plan.
Right. Okay. I don't want to be pressurising people. Has anybody anything else they wish to? Oh, Councillor Williams again.
Just we've touched on the use of the sports facilities and community buildings and those indicators. And I know we had a community where it's been difficult with community usage of buildings and how that's kind of gone. And it's good to see that they're being like the job. It's being redone and upgraded, and the systems in here to help drive. With like places like Gresham, there was one of the kind of spots as well that was difficult and had a drop. I think it was last year. I can't remember what the time frame for the report looked at. Was one of the other sports areas in West Bridgeford? Is it Alfred Road? And they had a lot of like drainage problems and that. Has that then had an impact this year, and has there been kind of investment put into that kind of facility to try and alleviate? And I know there was some other contractors that had to be involved because of the issue, but is there like kind of other things, and has that kind of then helped recovered, or is it that we're still on pitch bookings dependent on Gresham?
Probably an indicator of where the market is going to some extent, that you've had that big increase at Gresham, because using a all-weather facility, so to speak, all year round, you can play games on it. We still do get cancellations due to extreme weather, but there's less chance of your fixture being postponed, cancelled as a result of if you use a 3G pitch. So that means lots of clubs have switched over again, slightly in line with reforming after the pandemic. And grass pitch usage yet just isn't as much. There is simply less football, rugby leagues, less football, rugby teams and other sports using the facilities of grass pitches. So yeah, partly impacted by what happened at that specific case at Alford Road. One of the team have done what they can to try and alleviate that. It's just down to obviously what we get now with a lot more extreme weather. So at those times you'll find that actually most grass facilities are all very much in that same boat. I think in that particular occasion, that was the first time in roughly a decade that site had flooded to that extent. So yeah, the team will do what they can to obviously try and avoid localised flooding on that. But when you get that level of rainfall, it's difficult. It's more likely that we actually just overall grass pitch usage is just decreased compared to what it was, say, 5 years ago.
Thank you. Councillor Plant?
Yeah, there's a couple of paragraphs on the redevelopment of the Rushcliffe-on-Soar site, and I just wondered, will we be as councillors having a report on what is actually going on down there at any point in the near future?
I believe there's a report on the Freeport going to May Cabinet, so there'll be something then, but there will be periodic updates.
Councillor Way.
Thank you, Chair. Page 26, it's 4.2. You've mentioned here that discussions are well underway regarding the end of the PFI arrangements for the Eastleigh Leisure Centre. Is there any chance that you'd be able to provide the Eastleigh League Board members with some information about how that's going and what the expectations are once it's handed over?
I will pass the message on to Dave Banks.
Very well. If those are all the questions, the recommendation was that we looked at the expected revenue budget efficiencies, or the particular projected budget efficiencies and the overspend. I think we've done that. And also at the exceptions on performance, which I think we've given a fairly good thrashing to. So if everybody is in agreement, we will move on to the next item. And thank you very much for attending and bearing with us. Right.
I thought you were staying.
Right, if we can move on to item 6, which is the feedback from the Scrutiny Group Chairman. And if I start with Councillor Edderby.
Okay, so find the right thing. We had a meeting last week, and number of topics, the usual sort of things, where an internal audit progress report and also the internal audit strategy going forwards for this year. So we debated those and approved those. Risk management progress report. There are a number of sort of higher risks highlighted there, primarily due to local government reorganisation, I think is probably fair to say. And again, we had a good debate about those. Capital and investment strategy update. Obviously, that's a fairly standard report, and we're pleased to report that all is well, basically. I think actually it's possibly worth highlighting. I think it's only part of our investment strategy, obviously, but our own property portfolio, the occupancy rates are 100% at the moment, which is actually quite outstanding. And then capital investment strategy going forward. Possibly the biggest debate we had on the evening was the review of the Constitution. Number of issues were put forward. I won't go through every one, but we had quite a sort of interesting debate, and of course our recommendation there was we were recommending things to come forward to full council, so I'm sure there'll be a lively debate at full council on the constitutional reforms that have been proposed. One of the things that we were looking at was the number of people who were required to call a recorded vote. There was a proposal that it should be at least 5. We've actually reduced that to at least 4. We did actually have a discussion about comparison with other councils as to whether they, how many people you needed to record, for a recorded vote. There was a proposal that if in an ordinary full council meeting, a motion wasn't discussed, it should just fall. We actually pushed that one back and basically said it was felt unfair. If someone wanted to withdraw that motion because it was time limited, that's fine. But if it's still a relevant motion and if it falls, they've almost got to get back in as soon as the meeting's over to get their motion back in. And I think if someone's put a motion, then I think the feeling was that providing it's still relevant, it should be discussed. We talked about tightening up the scope of motions. I think it was Councillor Plant who, as I was leaving the last council meeting, said, I wish we could talk about things that were to do with Rushcliffe, basically. And I think that was largely a general feeling. And again, there was some debate about that. But we did actually pass the recommendation that we should be limiting the scope. Obviously, it's still down to the chief executive and the monitoring officer, or in conjunction with the monitoring officer, to assess whether a motion is valid. But I think we're trying to restrict motions to things that as a council we can actually act upon, and I think that's a fair thing to do. So that was a very quick summary of the lengthiest debate of the evening, I think.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a community scrutiny group on the 23rd of January, and we only really had the one item on there, which was about the resident survey, which is always challenging to kind of get responses when you look at the numbers of the residents that we have in the borough to the number of respondents that we get. So there was a bit of discussion around how we communicate with residents and to try and utilise different ways to try and get knowledge out there of the survey to try and get the responses back in. So there was a bit about like the different use of social media, because there's different demographics, age groups and that type of thing that utilise it. But even at some of our potential like community events, having QR codes was mentioned, about having there where people could just scan it, or even having a survey about that event if people are going to it, to kind of having more targeted surveying like that on particular issues, rather than having a big survey that could be daunting, but kind of have targeted ones like that. So as people are at the event, they might be more inclined to give their feedback rather than waiting when we put the resident survey out and stuff later on, because again, it's also very time dependent when the survey goes out for what responses we can get back in of what the feeling is around and the time of the year, and it's always tried to be at the same kind of time. But one of the things as well was then trying to get a bit of better understanding of what the results show, being from somebody who lives in a rural area or a urban area. And previously postcode, it was mentioned postcode had been used, but was seen as a bit of a barrier with people entering it, but it was just kind of having some general questions on, would you say that you live in a rural or an urban area, just and kind of things like that, or even having a list of places where people could just kind of select where they are in the borough in order to indicate where they live, just to kind of get some geographical relevance to the data and what it's showing. But then there was sometimes as well with some of the response where you've got the box for just general comments and stuff like that. People always, with every time we have the survey that goes out, is always highways issues, potholes, those kind of things get mentioned. So it was said about having or looking at what the preamble says on the survey, just to make sure that to kind of give some clarification on what services the Borough Council provide, and potentially like what the other councils provide, like, as I say, highways being county, and that, and around the litter picking and that type of thing with what we do, which was quite interesting, where there was perceptions of litter, and the litter picking was kind of contradictory in itself in the survey, and getting that kind of understanding as well. So and then it was just how, once we've had the survey, is then what has been said in it, what we then do with that results, and communicating back out to the public of, you've said, we've done, and we've acted upon. And as I say, that was the only substantive item that we had, and I don't think there was any other general feedback from the group as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds very good. Councillor Way, are you able to give us a rundown?
I'll do my best. Short notice. Our last meeting was on the 29th of January, and the only item on the agenda was about the health of our town and village centres. And there'd been a review of the 7 larger towns and village centres in April 2023. And the group looked at the results from this, and one comment is that although it's only 2 years ago, it can be quite out of date, because with the rapid changes in our economic circumstances, some of the things may not be as up to date as we would like, appreciating that it's a huge amount of work to ask somebody to do it again, but there's perhaps some scope for a little bit of updating. Reference was made to the economic growth strategy and plan, looking at a master plan for West Bridgford and the other town village centres, progressing a feasibility plan for the pedestrianisation of West Bridgford. There were some questions about whether or not there'd been any consultation on this, and this apparently was going to be part of the feasibility study. There was a lot of, the tourism brochure, funnily enough, was mentioned, that we talked about earlier, and how this could be become a good thing for Rushcliffe, because we've got an awful lot to show off in Rushcliffe, I think. One of the main concerns was the loss of banking facilities. Banks closing, I believe one in West Bridgford has just closed. And there was some discussion around these, I don't know what to call them, not pop-up banks, banking hubs, that's it, thank you. And that maybe we can encourage more of that to go on. I think there's some opportunity for something in West Bridgford Library, but maybe look at other centres. We don't have a bank where I live. No, you don't have a bank where you live. So yes, we have a post office, but I think there's still an element of where some people like to go and talk to somebody about their banking. I suppose that's it in a nutshell. Obviously, we had quite a lengthy discussion about the various towns and villages. And they resolved that to review the information and data provided on the town and village centres across the borough, consider and identify priorities and initial actions from the economic growth strategy, and suggest actions to be prioritised, and prioritise the closure of banks within the boroughs and village centres, and research opportunities for mobile banking and or banking hubs. I think they have these like mobile library type things, and go around and do that. So that is it in a nutshell. Short notice.
You mentioned that in the report some of the data was dated, that it came from 2023 and that we have moved on. Was there an opportunity for an action to give you some more up-to-date data?
There was a suggestion that it was revised, but I think we accepted the fact that it was a huge piece of work. And again, it could be quite costly in time, terms of officer time. but I think possibly there's some scope for us to feed into it a bit, because certainly I know from where I live, there's been, in those 2 years, there's been a lot of changes happening, and I suspect that's the same. Bingham must have changed enormously in 2 years, probably Cotgrave as well. So there's probably scope for looking.
And things are moving very fast, aren't they, at the moment, and things will be set to change even further.
Yeah.
Right, well, thank you very much. Can I just say, can we always remember in scrutiny meetings to keep the scrutiny to the subject of the reports and try and keep out the personal and the political? We're not really meant to be using it as political platforms, and I know that has been happening. So if we could try and make sure that our members do stick to the script.
I think on that subject, I would say that we did have a rather heated exchange in my meeting, where one member was getting quite political and someone took umbrage to it. I think we managed to work our way through it, but it was it's not the first time I've had to remind the person who got political that we're not there to be political. That's I can keep plugging away.
I thought the monitoring officer was there to referee that particular meeting.
Yes, the monitoring officer did referee it afterwards, I think.
So it's been noted. Right, okay. We move on then to item 7, feedback from lead officers, which I think might be you.
I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to say at this particular point. What I will do is give you a quick update. First, I don't want anyone cheering. This might be the last meeting that I'm doing in this particular role, because hopefully Charlotte will be back next week. So, which is good news. Yeah, we can cheer that bit.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Oh,
But don't cheer the bit about me.
I mean, it's good news that she's coming back.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it's good news that we're losing you. Right, well, we now move on to consideration of the scrutiny work programme. And I think there is a request for scrutiny. Am I right? Yes, which has come forward from Councillor Upton regarding planning and housing. And I think I'd be right in saying this has been has come forward as a result of a request which was bounced back, if I put it that way, to review management companies. But I think, am I not right, Councillor Way, that Councillor Phillips was going to see if he could find out from the rest of the councillors the particular housing companies that were causing issues. Sorry?
Councillor Matthews.
Yes. And I think that's how this has evolved, and in fact is now come forward as a scrutiny request. So have members had the opportunity of looking, and have they any comments? Councillor Plant.
No, I'm just very pleased to see it, actually. I think it'll be, well, it's been a long time coming, really, and I'm just wondering who will actually, well, it won't be able to turn up on the day to. Can you actually? No, I'm sure you can remember, Tina, and yes, Andy, you as well. When we used, prior to scrutiny and cabinet system, obviously they used to come to, what was it, performance review or something?
Yes, they used to come.
And Waterloo as well. It's not Waterloo now anymore. So I have to say, you know, having had 4 years off and then come back on, you just think, well, why are we still not having that role? So this is really good. I'm looking forward to that meeting.
That's exactly the point I'd got to make here as well. Yes, the fact we used to have them to come and report to us, and that was very helpful. And we seem to have lost that contact somewhere. I think we could do with re-establishing it. But so you're in favour of this going forward to scrutiny. Councillor Edderby.
Obviously, it's a very comprehensive request for scrutiny. There's a lot of things covered, and I think it's, as Councillor Plant says, it's quite right that we should be scrutinising the registered provider. And Metropolitan have grown enormously compared with what they were when I first became a councillor. And you know, I think there's a feeling that they're just a bit of a behemoth at the moment. But interestingly, I did get an email the other day inviting me to contact them to discuss, and I presume all councillors have had that. So it was perhaps at least something proactive was happening, but obviously scrutiny is an absolute necessity, I think.
Councillor Plenter.
Yeah, I do think it is a very comprehensive scrutiny matrix, but I would just, it's a matrix that really we shouldn't have arrived at that point. I just wonder, my understanding is that we have the Social Housing Regulation Act of 2023, and that has strengthened tenants' rights as well, have put more rigid regulation on social landlords and more proactive inspection, as well as my understanding was because of VIAP laws, it was like very stringent time frames, especially for areas like damp and mold that are detrimental to a tenant's health, and the timelines and the fines are there. So I don't understand why that hasn't been enforced. I just wonder what's the relationship as well as a council, how we encourage like the formation of tenants association and create spaces for them in a collective ways to where the disenfranchisement, especially about Metropolitan, because I don't know, whenever I am in a community space in the hyper reality of social media, statistically, there is always bound to be one post about metropolitan housing and about long waiting, stressful waiting for repairs and houses that are not habitable. So I'm just surprised that why it hasn't been enforced. And of course, it should go ahead as scrutiny, and we need to scrutinize what's happening. And we should be proactive. I suppose that was the idea of this Social Housing Regulation Act, that we should be proactive rather than reactive and have a regular mechanism to monitor the social landlords.
Mr. Linfield, are you able to throw any light on that?
I think, well, if you've got, obviously, it's good that they're coming, they'll be coming, and those sorts of issues you can raise with them at the particular meeting. So I think if you've got any specific issues you want tackling, or questions you want particularly answering, just forward them on, and we can obviously make sure that they form part of the sort of scope of the challenge with Metropolitan.
So do I take it that we are all in favour of this going forward for scrutiny? Very well, right. So in that event, we look at the scrutiny work programme. We've got the corporate overview group 1 with its rolling items, basically. Governance is very similar. Then we have growth and development and communities, both of which have vacancies, and housing provider. I think it probably favours communities, but I don't know. I will leave that. I leave that to the lead officer. Yeah. So, would we be looking to put that then in July? Is that sufficient time to prepare the reports?
Yeah. It's easy for me to say yes, I'm not doing the report, but we'll pencil it in for then.
Right, okay, so if we put that forward then for July. Oh, Councillor Williams.
Would that also depend potentially on their availability for July meeting, and if there is kind of that kind to prep for them, and who, as I say, there's a report to be written potentially by officers. That is that going to be enough time with July and speaking to them and
if we provisionally
and their
say,
availability, because of them being external, we've had stuff where it's moved because they haven't been able to make it. Well, I'd say we'll pencil it in, but obviously I'll take soundings back at the ranch just to see what the I mean, I don't think we progressed it too much because obviously we're waiting to see that the group was happy. This group was happy with the request. So. No, well, I don't know how much. I suppose it's how much a report will it be, as opposed to how much it's going to be a presentation by the provider. I mean, we're setting out the parameters really of what we want covering. It'll be for them to present then to the scrutiny group the position on some of the issues that have been raised.
yes, it was requested, and I think it's probably a result of an action that was requested. We have a review of the scrutiny requests and what happened to them. Has anybody any comments? I think, the decisions actually are fairly self-explanatory. I don't think there's anything really to cause any consternation.
I think it's certainly good to have it and see that, and that can be obviously seen by all councillors.
I agree with that. It shows where things have gone. And it also, I think, is probably very useful in terms of people putting requests forward within the time frame. You know that, oh, no, it's already gone forward. Perhaps if I want to put that forward, it's got to be with a different benefit.
Just to add something, just to add that it was really stimulating actually. Councillor Gaunt was sort of raised a question about understanding what's gone forward and what hasn't, and then linked to this, there's also been another query. There is an issue for me about we seem to getting less scrutiny requests at the moment, and it is important we do keep that sort of flow going. I mean, scrutiny. I mean, there are things that we can start looking at perhaps a bit more, maybe think about the rolling programme of things, some of the things that were discussed. And I think the reason we stopped doing that was more because we wanted scrutiny to be focusing more on where there were issues rather than people coming every year with almost the same presentation. And it felt a bit more like a beauty parade than a scrutiny review saying the same sort of things. And that's why we sort of erred away from that. And that's not to say that periodically we should be perhaps looking at some of our main providers, like Parkwood's another one, and then those sorts of things. So there's the scope there. There's also scope. So when we're doing some of our, the strategies, and some of the strategies that might go to cabinet, maybe looking at maybe action plans or framing the strategies. So there is scope there for scrutiny to start looking at those, doing more looking at those sort of things. And then the other areas for scrutiny really to focus on is obviously where if you're dealing there are actual issues. And so there's some problems that you feel that have been identified, but there's looks like problems in some performance or something like that, then obviously they're the other sort of areas. But it is just important we keep the flow of the scrutiny requests coming through. And really what we want to do with this was just to highlight, that I suppose to emphasise that obviously we do get scrutiny requests. There's some pushback. Sometimes some things don't necessarily need scrutiny. It can be simple answers from officers actually for some things, as opposed to any particular scrutiny review. But it is important that all councillors engage in the scrutiny process and look to put forward the scrutiny request.
I don't know if anybody had any ideas or requests they wanted to put forward.
Sorry, one thing I was going to add. Sorry, the other, what Councillor Gaunt asked for, which we might be looking at doing perhaps on Teams, is just perhaps a bit of don't know if you call it a training session, but some sort of session for councillors on the scrutiny request forms. So to help, I suppose, stimulate thought processes, but also to understand really what's required in terms of scrutiny and the request forms. That's a nice job that I'll pass on to Charlotte when she returns.
I'm sure she knows what's becoming. Councillor Way.
Thank you. Request not taken forward, and I asked for something about actually looking at the scrutiny process, and it says here that it's been reviewed in 2025. Well, we're 2 months into 2025. I'm just wondering if anything is happening, and if so, when will we hear about it, and what input will council members have into that process?
Well, I mean, that is, sorry, it will be later in the year. To fair, it will be later in the year. It won't be. Again, we want to get through full council, understanding who's doing what and everything else. But and I think as well, it came. I'm not sure, but it might have come out of the peer review as well. And that's where it emanated from. I think one of our actions from that is to undertake that particular task. So. I can't give you exact times at the moment. Members will be involved, obviously, and watch this space. So I'll try probably for the next time this group meets, we can do it as an action, Tracy, just as an update for this group, please.
Councillor William.
Okay. Yeah, like you say, it's encouraging councillors and that to look at it, and I think that better understanding of the form and that just to refresh thought process and thinking around it is a step forward with it, because as you can see, there's kind of the same kind of people that keep putting in scrutiny and that, but there's only been, I think on this document, only 2 from officers that we had was when I was first involved. Certainly on the council at least, used to get quite a few from officers, and that's kind of slowly tailed off. And I don't know if it's just so we don't get just people, because sometimes they were external people coming in from some of those scrutiny, and how we look at those. Like we've had the fleet and police come in, and Lex. Well, I can't remember if Lex came in. But I was just wondering if it's kind of a scope of looking back at some of the kind of previous terms and that, just to see if there's anything that could kind of come back in a certain time frame to be scrutinised, if it's then relevance to see where we're at with those kind of elements of what we've looked at previously, and if there's any time
in terms of people who are attending, you are, as chairman, able to request someone's attendance if you think that is going to contribute to your scrutiny of an item.
What I meant was an actual, we were scrutinising an item that was specific to that person, rather than for it, like with Metropolitan, you've got to get Metropolitan in to scrutinise them. Whereas if we're doing the carbon management plan, it's kind of who would you get it and that kind of thing, and people and some of the other items, like with the resident survey, is particularly you could have a whole range of different people that you could kind of get in for that. Whereas Metropolitan, like we just discussed, is Metropolitan. So there used to be some of those that came when I first came on to scrutiny, and
I think you need to discuss that with your lead officer as to whether they were relevant or not, and whether it was possible to get hold of them, because I know, and I think we're still trying to get hold of Severn Trent. They were supposed to come to, I think they've been asked 3 times.
They're outside my house every night at the moment.
So it's holding these people down to account, and that's what we need, to get them here to account. But yes, if you want to invite somebody, I'll discuss it with your lead officer and get them to attend. I haven't formulated it yet, but I was looking to possibly ask for scrutiny of our role within flood alleviation, because the matter is getting worse and worse, and it's not going to get any better. And there are areas where Rushcliffe have responsibility, but also areas where we need to put pressure on the outside agencies and authorities to step up to the mark, a bit like Severn Trent. So I haven't formulated yet, but that is in my head.
Okay.
Councillor Edavine.
Can I add my support to that idea? Because I believe there's quite a number of areas of Rushcliffe where there's a lot of avoidable flooding. And certainly in one of my villages, there's a lot of work being done, and I think the villagers welcome the amount of work that's been done. But it's highlighted a huge number of issues where most of the flooding has actually been caused by the utility companies wrecking the infrastructure when they've been working on it. And, that is just absolutely unbelievable. And there was one instance where someone had replaced a sort of 40 centimetre pipe with a 10 centimetre pipe as part of some building work. And a building inspector had signed that off, and that was one of the major causes of flooding in the village.
If you like to write to me with that as an example, like I say, I'll formulate something. But okay. That's just appalling, and it's not. I know I can give you an example, actually in my own home village, which is appalling. And I think we were talking earlier about the flooding of one of the playing fields, weren't we? And I'm not quite sure where that comes from. I've got a vague feeling that might be the Smite. And that, in fact, will be Trent Valley Independent Drainage Board. So, yes, I think this could prove to be quite a big item, and I'm afraid might be a bit of a drain on officer time. Exactly. Right. Councillor Edavine again.
I'm jumping back to on the requests not taken forward. Last year we actually introduced a premium on council tax for second homeowners as well as empty homes. Obviously it was voted through by Cabinet and then full council. I believe that the Cabinet will be keeping it under review, but I think it's also something that we should look at in scrutiny in the future, because I think if there is an impact on people, I've had a number of examples from people who, in one instance, someone who his main home is now in Spain, had a large house in West Bridgford which he was selling. I don't know the timescale over which he was selling it, but he ended up paying double council tax, which he wasn't very happy about. But in the meantime, he's also bought a flat, so he's now got a residence in the UK that is available because he's not fully in Spain. He still comes back for business, and he's probably got no idea whether that's liable for double council tax. Is it classed as a second home? It's his only residence in the UK, and I think there's all sorts of examples like that. I think you have to have it has to be given time to see if there is any impact, but at some stage in the future I'd like to see that scrutinised.
Yes, so there are bound to be anomalies, aren't there? And as you say, it has to run for a while before we can actually get to a point where we can produce a report on whatever those anomalies might be.
Yeah, well, Councillor Edavine and I have obviously been in discussion on this particular matter anyway, but I mean, it has the subject matter itself has been to scrutiny. It's outside because normally we say if it's been done in the last 18 months, then we don't tend to look at it. Obviously, it's outside that time. So, again, if you can pull together the matrix if that's how you want to proceed.
We don't have matrices
Sorry,
anymore.
the
We have
request form.
requests.
Sorry, slap wrist.
I think I'm sort of quite happy for it. Not happy. I think it needs to be given time, but so I was really highlighting that it must be reviewed at some stage in the future, and if and scrutiny would be a good place to review it as well as at the cabinet level.
One would hope it would be reviewed, yes, not left just to run. Right. Well, I think we have fulfilled our recommendations here. And unless anybody has anything further they want to add, I think that's the end of our meeting. Thank you all very much for coming.